questions. Entrepreneurship as a sole proprietor or a business owner, or entrepreneurship as an executive, both of them are valid paths. Number two, do you actually want to reach scale, and what does scale mean to you? And number three, are you willing to reach scale? So what are you willing to give up? What changes to your lifestyle are you willing to make to achieve that scale? So I'm going to go right in talking about the market in Nigeria. The market in Nigeria is fascinating to me. And when I first went into business, it's something that I didn't quite understand. So I think one of the biggest, according to CB Insights, one of the biggest reasons, the number one reasons why startup businesses fail is there's no market need for the product. So people are bringing products to the market which nobody wants. And that's the number one reason why businesses fail. There weren't enough customers, or there was no customers. So when you speak to entrepreneurs, I think some of the things that they bring up are lack of funding, lack of support, lack of mentorship, they can't find good staff. But actually the number one reason is just nobody wants it. So in terms of innovating for scale, who are we really innovating for? We live in a country of almost 200 million people. And sorry, there's a mistake on that slide. 98% of people actually have less than 500,000 naira in their bank account. So it reads 500 naira, but it's 500,000 naira in their bank account. So around less than $1,000 in their bank account. And on average, 60% of the average Nigerian's income is spent on food. In some regions in Nigeria, 80 to 90% of income is spent on food. So if you're not in food, then whatever business that you're in is going to be competing with food, and you need to think about what that means for your business. And if you look at the the diagram here, you can see that there's areas in Nigeria where they're not even making enough to give themselves a proper balanced meal, and actually 121% of income. So they're not actually able to make enough income to give themselves a decent meal. And this is your market. This is the market that you're going to be operating in. So it's not Silicon Valley, it's not London, it's not even South Africa. And I think the more that we start to look at this market and look at the peculiarities of this market, the better we are to be able to innovate for it. So the next slide shows the number of millionaires in Nigeria. And in Mumbai, there are about 60,000 millionaires. So just in the one city in India, there are 65,000 millionaires. In Delhi, there's about 30,000 millionaires. In Calcutta, there's 11,000 millionaires. In Hyderabad, there's 9,300 millionaires. In Nigeria, there are about 12,300 millionaires. So only 12,000 people with a net income of about $1 million. So obviously, the high net worth market, if you're targeting that market, is actually quite small, even compared to countries like India that we normally think about as the same market size as us. Then when you look at card transactions, over half of Nigeria's card transactions occur in Lagos State. And this is very important for people thinking about e-commerce ventures, especially where it's strongly reliant on people transacting online and people paying online. But you can see that a lot of people do not pay online. So this is something that we need to consider in our business plans, and I'll be providing solutions to these issues at the end of the presentation. This is an interesting statistic from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. A total of 15 million passengers passed through Nigeria's airports in 2018, compared to 341 million passengers that passed through Indian airports. And when I spoke to some of my people in the Ministry of Aviation a bit further about this 18 million, they actually said that they're not unique passengers. So these are not unique people. People that come from Lagos to Abuja every single week are still counted amongst these passengers. People that travel like me, probably 30 or 40 times a year, are still counted as individual each time that we travel. So the gentleman that I was speaking to was probably saying that the number is closer to 5 or 6 million unique passengers that travel. And this tells us a lot about our middle class, right, and affordability, and how many people can afford to travel by air. So again, this is more information about the market, and more information about the type of market that we need to be innovating for and directing our products to. The deputy governor compared the budget for Lagos State at 3 billion to the New York Police Department at 6 billion. And it's interesting, right? Because New York only has 9 million people, yet the budget for New York is almost $100 billion. Whereas Lagos State, according to some reports, has 20 million people, and our budget is just $3 billion. So the economies are much smaller. And even if you look at the size of the economy in Nigeria, it's about $400 billion. The state of California is about 3 trillion. So you're working with a larger economy in one American state than you're working with in the whole of Africa. And this is really, really interesting, because when you're scaling technology ventures, you're looking at the addressable market, right? You're looking about how you can get millions of people to pay for your product, not just use your product, but pay for your product. What is the addressable market for that product? So obviously, our businesses, the businesses that we start here and the businesses that we scale here are going to look a lot different to the ones in Silicon Valley. And it shows on our stock exchange as well. I mean, the biggest American companies on the stock exchange are companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon. And what are they doing? They're doing cloud servicing, cloud storage services. They're doing e-commerce services. They're doing artificial intelligence software. They're even going into robotics and self-driving cars. Whereas our biggest company, or one of the biggest companies on the Nigerian stock exchange, is selling salt and pasta. And the next stage of innovation is PMS, fuel, refined fuel, that Americans were doing like 200 years ago. So we have to look at our economy and what really feeds basic needs. What kind of products have really created scale? What kind of products have created billionaires? And the products that have created billionaires in Nigeria are cement and flour and sugar and salt. Not the same kind of products that have created billionaires in America. So there's a difference, a marked difference in what people will pay for here compared to what people will pay for in a lot of other countries that we model a lot of our businesses on. And that's why I'm so keen to have more Nigerian case studies in our entrepreneurship sessions, both in our business schools and in masterclasses like this. Because if we're not using Nigerian examples of companies that have scaled, like Dangote, like Chivita, like Indomie Noodles. Those are the companies that have scaled in Nigeria. It's very, very, very different from the very different market from the Amazons of this world. And a lot of these markets are growing bigger. The economies are actually growing. So if you look at globally, some economies are growing at 5%. That means the amount of money available in those economies is growing at 5% every year, which is fantastic. Some economies are even growing more than 5% per year. Whereas in actual terms, Nigeria is one of the only 8 countries in the world where people have gotten poorer for 20 years running. As you can see on this World Bank diagram, there are very, very few countries, mostly in Africa, where you can see that GDP has actually gone down. So the amount of money in people's hands per capita has actually gone down for 20 years running. And we also need to consider this. In a lot of countries, people are getting richer. People are now finding money for Netflix. They're finding money to do cloud storage. They're finding more money for their Ubers. They're finding more money to buy technology services. However, in Nigeria, people are getting poorer. And there's less and less purchasing power in people's hands. There's less budget for more people. Our population is growing faster than the economy, meaning that we're shrinking in real terms. And that's something that we also have to bear in mind when trying to innovate for scale. Oops. Okay, so who is the market in Nigeria? I really like the way that the Indians have divided their market into India 1, India 2, and India 3. So India 1 are the bourgeoisie. They call them the avocado group. Those are people that earn $9,000 or more. And there are 110 million people in India that earn $9,000 or more. I'd just like to take it out to the audience. How many people do you think fall into that category in Nigeria? Just raise your hands if you have a number or call out a number. How many people do you think in Nigeria earn $9,000 or more? Per year, yeah. Any ideas? India is 110 million for reference. Anybody? So I hear 10 million in the corner. Any other suggestions? 12 million from there, okay. Any other suggestions? Sorry? 5 million. So, sorry? 500,000, okay. So we've got estimates between 12 million and 500,000, but the number is actually 2 million. So if your business is targeting people that earn $9,000 a year or more, then you can't really scale unless you're selling a very expensive product, because 2 million, even if you have the two, how many customers out of like a total of 2 million can you get? Maybe 200 or 300,000, right? So it's going to be very, very difficult for you to scale if your product is only targeted at that group. And when you look at Nigeria 2 is where the real market is, and that's people that earn about $3,000 per year. And then you see a lot more people there, and those people are about 80 million. So that's what I think is the viable market. 90 million are living on less than $2 a day. That is not a market for anything, maybe except food. So Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. And when you compare to India, you realize that India has more rich people, but Nigeria has more poor people, even though India has a population of over 1 billion and we have only 2 million. We still have more poor people than India. So with 90 million very extremely poor people that you can't really sell that much to, about 80 million people that are quite poor. I mean, $3,000 is like 1.5 a year, maybe 2 million naira a year. That is where the bulk of the population is. And then just 2 million earning $9,000 a year. It makes you really, really think about what products can scale. And that's why I mentioned earlier on that things like salt and flour and sugar scale because they are things that everybody can afford. And even if you say some products cross over between 1 and 2, the case studies show that this is actually quite hard to do. So some people will say that Uber, for instance, crosses across Nigeria 1 and Nigeria 2. But both groups of people are dissatisfied with the product. As Nigeria 1 people don't like the cars that they use for Uber. They would actually prefer to pay more to be in a better car. So you don't see very many Nigeria 1 people take Uber just because they don't like the cars. The cars are too old. They're used to driving their Prado or their G-Wagon, and they don't like the kind of cars that are used on Uber. But Nigeria 2, it's actually a bit expensive for them. It's almost like a luxury for them to actually even get into an Uber because they're normally on public transport. So for them, bringing down the price more would be far, far better for them. So you have to keep on thinking, especially in technology, how can we serve all these segments? Is there a way, is there a type of product that can reach scale? Because we're talking about innovating for scale, that can serve some of these segments, or at least can concentrate and get enough of the people in Nigeria to be able to make a scalable product. So things to think about when innovating for the Nigerian market. And this is really sort of targeted at technology firms when you're thinking about, okay, what can we really do to make sure that our products can scale within Nigeria too, or Nigeria 1 and 2 and can reach a scalable number of customers that would meet your definition of scale. I would say, since there are only about 25 million smartphones, then it would be very, very difficult for you to go and do an internet-only product if you are looking for scale. So consider USSD offerings, consider offline offerings, consider what we call full-stack offerings, so offline and online business models where people can do things online and offline. I know Iroko TV was an online-only streaming platform, but now they've innovated to do offline offerings as well. And I think the most important thing when you're starting a business in Nigeria and you want it to scale is to think about price, think about affordability, think about the addressable market, and think about the person that you're scaling for. Don't innovate for your friends, innovate for your gatesman. So that's the last slide that I have about things to do when you're trying to innovate for the Nigerian market. So in summary, a tech company that scales in California is operating in a larger market than if you had scaled your company to the whole of Africa with their different currencies, with their different problems. So you need to think about economic size when you're trying to scale your business. And some businesses even operate from Nigeria but have global offerings so that they're able to sell in more developed countries as well, so that they can access that market size. So that's another idea. Number two, when we're looking at these Silicon Valley models and when we're looking at these American models, because we read Harvard Business Review, we read The Economist, we read case studies from foreign literature, we have to bear in mind that every time we read these case studies to try and indigenize these examples and think about our own market. And I hope I've convinced you that even India, that a lot of Nigerians sometimes look down on, is not our mate in terms of market size. They have far more rich people, and business models that would even work in India don't necessarily translate to Nigeria and definitely will not reach the scale, at least with the class 1 that you'd have in India. And then number three, the ecosystem in Nigeria for innovation will develop, but it's not going to develop directly through copy and paste. It's going to develop through us really having a deep understanding of the market, a deep understanding of our customers, and trying to serve the customer in front of us, not the kind of customer that we want the person to be. Thank you.